blast! We are currently going through a series of Have You Heard Of? So far we looked at Dorcas and how each one of us, we leave a legacy behind, a reputation, something good or bad, but something to be remembered by. And then last week we looked at Bezalel, how he truly must have lived by the principle preparation meets opportunity, because God chooses him and his excellent skills to build the tabernacle where God's presence will be. I don't know if I can even build a sandcastle, honestly, but let alone that. Huge responsibility. Today, I will ask you this. Have you heard of Haddasah? I love her story. Here we study the Olaway. So, O stands for observations of facts in the Bible, L stands for practical lessons that we learn from different people, and A stands for action steps that we can take. Let's dive in. So, have you heard of Haddasah? Well, her story will sound very familiar because she's mostly known by her non-Hebrew name. She was taught to hide her identity. Before we get into that, let's bring our little expert to give us a little bit of context. When did all this happen? For a very long time, the Israelites were led by judges and then by kings. They were one united kingdom ruled by King Saul, King David, King Solomon, but then bad news. Because of sinful choices of King Rehoboam, Solomon's son, the kingdom is split in two. We have at the north Israel, Samaria is the capital, and in the south we have Judah, with Jerusalem as its capital. Because of ongoing sinful choices the kings and the people make, Israel gets exiled and taken by the Assyrians in captivity. About 100 years later, Judah gets taken into captivity by the Babylonians. For many years they're all spread out, but some get to return home, only about 50,000 of them. Here's where Hadassah's story comes in. Far away from Judah, living in the citadel of Susa. Let's look back at the context. Any cool facts about Hadassah? We know that she doesn't have a mother or a father. She is raised by Mordecai, her cousin. Well, he must have been a little bit older because he raised her as his own daughter. Cool fact about Mordecai is that he is related to King Saul. Upon council, King Xerxes is searching to replace Queen Vashti, who didn't submit to his authority. So queen position is now open. Beauty factor played a huge role. It's interesting how even our physical appearance is not by mistake in God's eyes. Letters were sent in all 127 provinces of his kingdom, but that was not necessary because the future queen lived right around the corner in the citadel of Susa. Hadassah becomes the queen. To keep the story simple, let's get acquainted with four important names. We have King Xerxes, the king of Persia. We have Haman, an arrogant man seeking power. We have Mordecai, a God-fearing Jewish man who is not bashful to stand up for what is right. And of course we have Haddasah, the daughter of his uncle Abihail, whom he chooses to raise as his daughter. Haman comes to the king complaining and making accusations about Mordecai, that he is a threat to King Xerxes, which was a lie because Mordecai had saved his life before. Haman hates him because he would not bow down to him. So Haman convinces Xerxes to destroy him and his people. So they send letters again throughout the whole empire. When Mordecai hears about this, he is very scared, not just about him, but for the entire nation. So he gets one of the letters and sends it to Haddasah, telling her that Haman wants to destroy the entire nation. Haddasah wants to help, but she doesn't know how. It was risky to go in front of the king uninvited. She could lose her life. And wise counsel from her cousin Mordecai came. He told her, "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." After 3 days of fasting, Haddasah risked her life and came in front of the king uninvited. And in a very creative way, God allowed her to expose Haman's evil schemes, saving not only her life, but the lives of many Jews. Remembering that for such a time as this, she became a queen. Even if it was scary and confusing, she stepped up to the challenge, trusting God. Let's take a look at some of the observations. Number 1, sin has consequences. There's the exile, there's the split kingdom, there's Haman losing his life. Number 2, God is merciful, and he chose to rescue his people over and over again in spite of their sin. Doesn't He do that every day with us? Number 3, everything has purpose. Even her being an orphan or her beauty. We don't know if her parents would have made the same choices as Mordecai or not. Let's take a look at some lessons. Count the cost of your actions. Whatever choices we make, good or bad, we need to count the cost and be okay with it. Haddasah knew the price of her action. That's why she said, "If I perish, I perish." Yet, she knew she had to step up for such a great cause. Lesson number 2, we need to learn to be grateful for being rescued. There's a verse that records, "There was joy and gladness among the Jews with feasting and celebrating." Shouldn't we be celebrating more often how God rescued us from sin, but even from scary events in our life? Lesson number 3, which I find most important, for such a time as this. God has purpose for every detail in our lives, and He will use it in His timing. Let's take a quick look at some action steps. Number 1, list some ways God has rescued you from. In order to be grateful, you need to know what you've been rescued from. It could be spiritual, it could be moral, it could be physical. Number 2, create a post note and write "for such a time as this" as a reminder that nothing surprises God and everything in our lives have purpose. God doesn't waste any details, not even our freckles. Lord Himself goes before you. I will be with you. And Lord Himself goes before you. I will be with you. He'll never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. He'll never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. And Lord Himself goes before you. I will be with you. And Lord Himself goes before you. I will be with you. He'll never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. He'll never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Deuteronomy 31:8. Deuteronomy 31:8. If you enjoyed this, but even if you didn't, I would appreciate your support by subscribing. Also, click the bell so you get notified when we post something new. Thank you. Bye!